Jams, jams, jams. Picture books and jams. Welcome, everybody, to PBJamz. Music and picture books. What a perfect sandwich. Squish them all together. What a yummy snack.
Well, good morning or afternoon, whenever it is that you guys are joining us for this episode of PBJamz. We are very happy to see you here today. I am here with Buffy Silverman, and Buffy is the author of this lovely book called Starlight Symphony. And it is a perfect book for PBJamz. And I was just delighted when I read Buffy's book because it really meshes two of my favorite things. And, you know, we mesh a lot of my favorite things here all the time, but this is nature and music. And she's just done a marvelous job of comparing nature to some musical instruments, which is really kind of a unique take. So welcome, Buffy. Glad to have you today.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yes, it has been wonderful to be able to get together. I was telling Buffy this is my first interview for you guys in a while because I've been away to Australia and New Zealand, which was wonderful.
And I was saying how lucky you were.
Yes, and I really was. It was such a wonderful trip. So, but I am glad to be back in the PBJamz place with you guys and with Buffy. And start us off a little bit, Buffy, talking to us about the inspiration for this book. Like, how did you come to think about this idea of blending nature and these musical instruments in particularly?
So I live on the swampy end of a little lake. And across from us, there's a temporary pool. So it is extremely noisy in the springtime, starting with the spring peepers that peep, peep, peep really, really loudly and goes on and on. So when people think of living in the country, they often think of it being quiet. It is not quiet. All the animals have their own songs and calls. And I really love nature. That's what one of my greatest interests is nature. I spend a lot of time outside taking photographs and writing poems about nature. Most of my writing is about nature. Now, exactly how I got the idea of comparing the songs of different animals to different musical instruments, I wish I could remember, but I don't. It was just something that came to me at a certain point in time.
Got you. It was so clever, and I love it. I love all the analogies that you've created in this book, and the poetic nature is very lyrical, and just the text itself is musical. So it just really lends itself beautifully to that. I think you did a marvelous job of meshing those things.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So tell us a little bit about the journey from that first draft, and that first, maybe even the idea or the whatever you can remember of the early stages of the book to how it came to be published.
Well, I looked it up, and I have 10 drafts that are saved. Okay. I'm not sure whether there were others that I got rid of. So this manuscript really changed quite a bit. A lot of my work doesn't. This one, I think, changed more than any other manuscript. And I started off as a prose manuscript. And I thought what I'd do is read a couple of different versions so that you could hear how much it changed over time. The first draft was called Woodland Symphony, and I'll just read the very beginning. As the sun sets, the concert begins. So I guess I did have the idea of a concert immediately. Cricket hides in the grass and raises his wings. Chirp, 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 he plays, bowing one wing over the other. Chirp, chirp, chirp. From a branch of the maple tree, the sound of a flute answers. Eole, 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 wood thrush sings. And I thought this was going to be a prose book that would be a bedtime book. And there was going to be a child looking out the window. And in the end, there would be parents singing and a whole repetition. That draft was fairly rough, but I had the inspiration to work on it more because I believe it was in 2019, right before the pandemic started. I was really lucky and got a mentorship. SEBWI Michigan offers different mentorships And I had entered the one for published authors with picture books because the person who was going to be the mentor was Kelly DiPuccio. And I've known Kelly for a long time, and her writing is brilliant. And I thought, well, if I could work with Kelly, that would be really nice. And I was lucky and I managed to get this mentorship. And so I worked on this manuscript for Kelly to send to her. And this is the beginning of the one that I sent to her. And then it was called Lakeside Symphony. The flutist plays a cheery melody. Iole, iole, sings Wood Thrush from his perch on the maple tree. The cellist lifts his bow. Chirp, a chirp, drawing one wing over the other. Cricket chirps a tune. Well, Kelly looked at this, and rather than give me a critique, she looked at it and read it and said, well, I never say this, but this would work so much better in rhyme, that you need to have the music. And it just didn't occur to me. I've written, quite a few rhyming books. It didn't occur to me to put it in rhyme. And she said, don't kill me, don't hate me, but I really think you should write this in rhyme. And it was such an interesting journey for me to take a manuscript that was all written and then turn it into rhyme, as opposed to starting out with the idea of rhyme. And I got to say, I think that's a really good way to go. It's not what I would have done on my own, but I knew what the story was. I knew what the elements I wanted to include. Not that it was simple to find a way to write that in the right rhythm and rhyme, but that's where I started. And then I'll just read the beginning of As It Is Now. The lighting dims, the curtain lifts, musicians gather, spotlight shifts, a flutist's airy melody sparkles in a maple tree. Iole, wood thrush sings with silver notes and copper wings. The cellist draws his bumpy bow, rubbing, rasping, to and fro. Chirp a chirp, two wings rise. Loud and fast come crickets' cries. So you can see the subject matter is all the same, but the language changed. And I think by having that in my head ahead of time, it really enabled me to find the music of where this book should be.
Yeah, that's so interesting because, yeah, I mean, it's not feedback you typically get. Oh, please try this in rhyme. No. But I mean, number one, she was 100% correct, right? Like, it's so beautiful like this. And not that it wasn't beautiful the other ways, but I mean, pun absolutely intended, but now it really sings, right? And it's so lovely. But I think your point about having the story in your head and even written down ahead of time and then shifting to rhyme, like I know one of the criticisms of people who try writing in rhyme is that you sacrifice the story for the rhyme. And so
and the story has to come first.
Exactly. And so you literally did put the story first. So you had all of those pieces. And so I'm thinking you wouldn't be as easily succumbing to that idea of sacrificing the story for the rhyme because you already have the story set.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the ending changed. What I sent to Kelly, most of it's pretty close to what's published in the book. The ending, I still had this kid with the parents, and Kelly gave me some suggestions on it, but it never quite worked. And then I had sent it to an editor after a webinar. I got the chance to send it to an editor, and she rejected it, but she said to me, even in this kind of nonfiction, you still need an arc. And it suddenly, after thinking about what she was saying, it suddenly occurred to me that it made a whole lot more sense to do it with animals, to go from the evening animals getting to night and then returning, having a little break, and then returning in the morning with the morning chorus of a robin singing. And when I got that, I realized, okay, yeah, this works now.
So the timeline kind of became the arc of the story.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Fascinating. Really cool. And, hearing you talk about that and, Kelly's influence and then the editor's comments, like it just reminds me, what a team effort it really is to do writing. And we think of it as such solitary, but it really is a team effort.
Right. And this manuscript had a journey of about 4 years from when I started writing it till it was accepted.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Well, sometimes just finding that right way to tell it is like maybe more than half the battle of telling the story, just finding that right inroad to tell it the right way. So that's wonderful. Well, obviously, we've already been digging in a little bit around the edges of the musical connections. We definitely have lyrical writing, and the animals are definitely making sounds. But talk to us about the musical connections as you see them in Starlight Symphony.
Well, what I tried to do was do a lot of onomatopoeia so that kids could hear the sounds of the animals. And then I spent a lot of time on the internet listening to different animals and listening to different instruments and the animals and trying to find the matches. So something like, I'm guessing the reason I started this was if you look in a bird book and you look at a wood thrush, they'll say, "Iole" sounds like a flute. And so then I started looking for others, and I did a little Googling of what instruments sound like different animals. I think I got some in Peter and the Wolf. There's some classical ones there, which I didn't really use. But I kept searching for the right sounds. And a couple of those did end up having to change because, an editor said, well, no, that doesn't really sound like that. I think it was the beaver kits, which end up being sand blocks to make the sound of the chewing. And I had something different, which I can't recall, but didn't quite work.
Nice. So do you have some musical background yourself? Do you play or?
Well, I used to play violin very poorly. I was in the back of the second violins in a young people's symphony years ago. And then my younger daughter did Suzuki violin, and I picked up the violin again when she was doing that. I think I'm better at singing than at playing, and I never was that very dedicated to it. But I do like music.
Yeah, it requires a lot of practice. I picked up guitar a few years ago and tried, but yeah, it's hard to find the time in your schedule, and you've really got to be dedicated and do the practice. And I just really don't seem to find that time or that dedication right now at this point in my life. So you're right, but I'm sure that helped. I mean, having had that musical background, even to that extent, I think it really shows up in our manuscripts when we have things in our background. And obviously the nature, is obviously something that you're passionate about. And I think that really comes through for sure.
Well, I hope it does.
To me, it does for sure. I love it so much. And I don't know if you're familiar, probably you are since you're a nature person, but just chatting here, the Merlin app. Do you know the Merlin app?
I have the Merlin app. Yes.
Yeah. So if you're a bird watcher, my PBJamz peeps, and you don't have the Merlin app, you really should check that out. And one of my favorite things about it is that you can take it out and put it on record. And it'll record all the bird sounds that it hears. And in most cases, it'll tell you the birds that it hears. So even if you can't see the bird, you'll know what birds are around you. And it's wonderful.
We were using it. And when I first got it, a warbling vireo kept singing. And I had no idea there was a warbling vireo in my property. I still have never seen it.
Yeah.
But now I can hear it all the time in the late spring and early summer. So it's so interesting what you hear around you that you didn't know was there.
Yeah, and it's amazing how well it's tuned to be able to, figure out what that is. And it was
Right.
interesting when I was in Australia this summer. I was so excited because I'm like, I get to see new birds. And so I pulled up my Merlin app and it goes, okay, but Merlin only can tell you like 3% of the birds. And I'm like, well, what good is that? I was
Oh, I'm
so
surprised. So they
disappointed.
don't have a pack for
They
Australia.
have a pack, but I don't think they have good resources for the sound, for the
Okay.
actual recorded sounds. And so you can look and see the bird, you can see the birds, but that recording piece, you can record it, but it's not going to identify the birds. Yeah,
Okay.
so it was really interesting. But yeah, this I'm sitting here looking at I have your wood thrush picture pulled up right now, and I'm thinking, Merlin's so great for that, about, being able to hear and identify. And it's especially nice for those birds that are not super social, the ones that kind of hide and stay in the bushes, and they are a little bit harder to see. So that's just a free little nature tip from Buffy and me, the Merlin app. You should check it out. It's wonderful. Um, Love it. And there's also I'm drawing a blank. It's called let me look. It's called iNature. Is that right? Have you got that
iNaturalist.
one? iNaturalist.
iNaturalist. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. My
Yes.
husband uses that one all the time.
Yes, that one's wonderful too. And you can take a picture of a plant or an animal that you don't know what species or variety it is, and they'll give you some recommendations, and then other people will weigh in and help you sort out. So if you're trying to identify something from the nature side of things here, those are a couple of great apps that you can add if you are not familiar with them.
We
Yeah.
used to carry a backpack full of field guides when we'd go out hiking, and you don't need to do that anymore.
Not with those. As long as you have, and I mean, even if you don't have it right there, you can take the picture, and then when you get back to where you have service, then you can, do your research and look it up. It really has made it much, much nicer. I'm the same. We used to have a nature backpack, and we would always take it when we were going out on our little outside adventures. And yeah, all the field guides that were applicable, and little, our binoculars or little telescopes or whatever we had, our little bug boxes. Yeah, all the things, all the
And
things.
now you just need a phone.
Just a phone, that's it. It'll magnify, it'll do all the things. So yeah, binoculars still might be kind of
Yeah.
handy, I'm thinking.
Yeah.
I haven't been out like that in a while, but I do miss that. It's a lot of fun to go out nature watching. Um, so talk to us. Well, first off, before I get to the last question, is there anything else that you would like for us to know about the book? Anything that you wish I had asked, or anything else regarding the music and the nature that we didn't talk about that you would like to share?
Well, what I'd like you to know is that the book is published in a library binding. So it is a little bit pricey, but what I hope you'll do is go to your library and ask them to order it, and take it out from the library. And I hope you will share it with some kids that you know, because my goal when I'm writing is to reach kids. I feel very strongly that kids who fall in love with nature become environmentalists. That's what happened to me. That's what happens to many people. And if you're not exposed to it, then it's harder to care. So I think reading books like this is one way to help kids develop that empathy for the natural world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like this is a good time. So we often talk on PBJamz about ways that you can support our authors. And so Buffy just laid out a couple of great ways. Obviously, share the book with a child, but requesting it from your library, that's a great thing to do to help these authors get their books out into the world and share these beautiful books that they've created. And we also talk about reviews. So if you do check this book out, if you do love it, leaving a review on Amazon, Goodreads, Barnes and Noble, those are great ways to help support them and let people know that the books are really, worthwhile. I always say word of mouth is the very best way. So going back to her comments about sharing it with somebody, children, other people who love nature, like I'm sitting here thinking, I have a friend at work who's a big naturalist as well. And I'm thinking, oh yeah, I got to share this with Nikki for sure. And she's our school librarian. So there you go. Win, win, win. Right. So find the people in your world who love nature or who love music and, share it with them. And then, ask for it at your local school library, your kids library, or your public library, whichever ones you have access to. And don't shy away from purchasing it for yourself, because those library bindings just mean it's gonna be very good quality.
It will last.
Yeah, it's gonna last a long time. Yeah, because those are just reinforced. They're just designed to handle a lot of handling by kids and people. Yeah. So
and I was very fortunate. This book has gotten 2-starred reviews so far in Booklist and in Kirkus. So I hope that helps it reach the library audience.
Yes. Wonderful. Yeah, those starred reviews and Kirkus is very difficult to get those starred reviews. So that is definitely a calling card for sure. Yeah. So yeah, those are some ways that you can reach out and help the authors and more about sharing the books that you love, getting those books that are important to you out into the world. So be sure to do all those lovely things. And before we wrap up, Buffy, let's talk about what is coming next for you. Do you have some things that are either in the works or some events coming up where people can find you? What's happening?
Well, I am working on a couple of different picture books. I've also working on a novel in verse. Who knows whether that's really, I've got a first draft, and then somebody gave me, somebody who I respect a lot, gave me some wonderful comments, and I was like, oh, what do I do with this now? So right now I'm in the revision stage for both that and the picture books. I don't have anything else that's sold yet, but I have some things out, so we'll see.
Yeah, nice. And Buffy and I were talking before, and she does do school visits. So if that's something that you're interested in, I think they can probably find that information on your website. Is that right?
Yes. And if you're not in the area of Michigan, I will do online school visits. I love doing in-person school visits, but I have done online ones also.
Yeah, those virtual visits can be really phenomenal and special. I do that a lot because we're in a very small town. We're kind of a remote area. And so I oftentimes have authors come in and do virtual things for I do a little writers group. I would have to do it, Buffy, the same way that school you were talking about with like 300 kids and 300 kids. And so, yeah, I'm probably not going to do that live and in person at our school, but the virtual thing for like my after school writers club works really well. And, for a small group, especially just a one classroom or, a small group, those are great little visits, and they feel so special knowing that and authors come just to talk just to them. So be sure, if you're interested, check out Buffy's information and get her into your classroom if you're interested in that, or your other events that might be appropriate. I mean, I can think of lots of groups that might want to have you in to talk about this book as well. So that's fabulous. Well, there's probably so much more that we could talk about, and the book is just really beautiful. Make sure you check out all the information below on the blog post. I'm going to link up all Buffy's information, including the website, where you can find out more about her school visits and things that she does. Also, any social media or anywhere else that you can find her information, and where you can buy her book. And then there's going to be tons and tons of teaching activities. And there's going to be a lot because I love, like, this checks all my boxes: nature, music, I like all the things. So there'll be lots of teaching ideas for both the music classroom and the regular classroom, but also families can use this. It's not just the classroom. This one is really perfect to use with daycare centers, preschools, families, homeschools, all those things. So anybody's welcome to grab those teaching tips. And I always include a YouTube playlist and a Pinterest board. So all that's going to be down below, along with a piece of music that I picked specially to go along with Buffy's beautiful book. There'll be a little summary of the book, all kinds of things. So go and check all that stuff out. If you leave a comment on the blog within the next 2 weeks. So if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you go to the blog. The link is in the description. I'm checking my calendar here so I don't tell you incorrectly. So if you leave a comment on the blog before midnight on September 25th, well, 11:59 on September 25th, then you'll be entered into a drawing, and Buffy's publisher is actually giving away one free copy of the book. So you can have your own copy added to your library if you just leave a comment, and then we'll do a little drawing as I get ready to do the next episode of PBJamz. So September 25th, I think, is that target date. So be sure you leave a comment on the blog, not on the YouTube video, but go to the blog and do that. And be sure that you share this out like we were talking about with all the people around you that love nature, birds and ponds and lakes and insects, all the things, and all the music that they create. It's a big year for cicadas, Buffy. Have you seen a lot of cicadas where you are?
Well, we get the annual ones. We don't get, so every year we get them in, and yes, we've had them.
Yes. And speaking of loud, they are loud.
Yeah, they certainly are.
Yeah. Yes. And she's right about living out in the country. It is very peaceful, but it's not always quiet. Yeah. There's a calm to that, to all the noise, but it is definitely not completely quiet. So we are wishing you days of beautiful sounds and lots of music and time in nature to reflect and enjoy the creation. And so we hope that you'll do that while you enjoy Buffy's book. Share it out, and we will see you next time on PBJamz.
Thanks so much for having me. This was really fun.
Thank you for being here, Buffy. It's been great.
Okay.
All right, guys. See you next time.
PBJamz, yummy books